another beautiful Sunday afternoon. This is Rubbin Minds. Welcome. My name is Ebuka Obiuchendu. Thanks a lot for joining us as always. Now, I've been hosting this show, I think, for my first show was on the 6th of January 2013. And every Sunday before I come on this show, I put out a tweet saying, and Rubbin Minds is live, so that those on Twitter can join us and watch. And for the first time in almost 9 years, I'm not able to do that because the federal government set out a directive that Twitter has been suspended temporarily in Nigeria, and it is where we are today. But my story is, my situation with tweeting about the show is only a small part of what is a big picture with regards to what this temporary suspension means for a lot of Nigerians. We're talking businesses, we're talking human connections, we're talking fundamentally free speech, which is something that should not be toyed with. So we're going to be talking a lot about what this directive means for Nigerians, for young Nigerians, for business, for the economy, for the future of this country, and basically for freedom of speech and freedom of the media. And I'm joined now by Pamela Adegoke. Thanks a lot for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So this is one of those situations where it's very hard to see reason with the points of this, and it's something that a lot of Nigerians have always thought would never happen here. We've seen a lot of countries where this happens. We even joined Uganda, I believe, a couple of months or so ago, in their fights for free speech when Twitter was being restricted. We see things like this in Ethiopia. How did we get here, and how has this affected you? Because I know a huge part of your business and your income comes from being on Twitter.
So when the news broke out, or when we started tweets on Twitter, that they announced that they are shutting down Twitter in Nigeria, so they announced on Twitter. It was like a great shock to all of us. We're like, are you guys joking? So this is one of the I would say fastest thing they've ever implemented. It's happened so quick. It went into that press room and declared, and the next thing is restrictions. We are still in doubt, like, okay, is this actually real? So they went from permanent suspension to temporary. By God's grace, in the next few days, probably lift it off. But welcome to Nigeria, that anything is possible. This is the situation of things in this country.
But like I said at the start of the show, there's a lot more to this than just tweeting. For someone like you who runs your business there, give us a bit of an idea of what this does for you as a business, or people who a lot of their income comes from Twitter, especially at a time when we're talking of almost 35% unemployment in this country.
So, number one thing, I think the government, they acted rationally on emotions. They did not think it through. Like, it's not just tweeting. There are a lot of businesses. I make my living up there. A lot of Nigerians want to be like me. A lot of people make their money off that platform. A lot of businesses started on that platform. Employment, jobs. It's a lot. It's way more than tweeting. But they did not see it from that direction. It's a really sad thing. We are complaining about unemployment, and you are adding to it.
Well, I think we're joined now by, I believe, Antiada online. If you can hear me, how are you doing? Okay, Tosin, I beg your pardon. Tosin Olashende, founder of Money Africa. Tosin, how are you doing if you can hear me? Hello, I can see you. Can you hear me?
Yes, okay, I can hear you.
Okay. How are you doing? Hope you're having a better Sunday than a lot of us. We're talking about this Twitter situation with Nigerians. How you are a business owner, how does this directly affect you? And like I said, the bigger picture of what it does with regards to the crazy unemployment numbers we have already and what this does for young businesses and growing businesses in Nigeria.
Fantastic. Let me paint the picture for you, Ebuka. A lot of young people on a daily basis come on social media to actually find jobs. A lot of small businesses like mine find their employees via social media. Now the world has gone global. You see somebody that is an editor or has technical skills, they're able to access the global markets. Now, there was even a situation whereas a foreign investor saw a company in Nigeria, sent them a DM via Twitter and invested in it. Now, that's a foreign direct investment. That company in Nigeria is employing people. If they don't have such an investment like that, they will not be able to expand their capital base. So it's like a whole ripple effect, right? From a small business owner to a growing one, being able to access the global community, being able to increase visibility. And if you cannot grow, you won't be able to employ more people. So the unemployment numbers, just being able to see how it is directly linked to it is quite interesting.
So, how did you receive this? And I mean, they say it's a temporary ban or a temporary suspension. We don't know what this temporary span is going to look like. Because I think I saw a tweet a couple of days ago about how much is lost on a daily basis with a ban on Twitter, talking almost 100 million naira or something along those lines from small businesses. And it could even be more if we're looking at a much bigger picture of the sort of, DMs, direct messaging and core investments, that connections that happen on that kind of a space. The longer this goes on for, what do you see coming back being harder? I guess my question is, can we last long with this sort of a ban, or is this something that needs to come back immediately?
It's something that actually needs to come back immediately. So, for instance, now, there was no heads up. It was very fast. So we didn't even have a chance to quickly respond. There were a couple of customers we had in our DMs on Twitter that we can't access now because we've been cut off, right? And not just for my business, for even other business owners, many people selling food, selling all these quick, fast, perishable goods that go on social media to get their clients on a regular basis without any heads up, without any notice, have been cut off from their income source. So it's quite interesting how this happens so quickly. So definitely, it is something that it would be nice for it to be reviewed, for it to come back as soon as it can, so other business owners will be able to continue to put food on their table and also be able to pay their employees.
Yeah, I'll come back to you at sorry, Tosin, but let me come to you now, Pamilari. This business of influencing on social media has become really big.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you guys get accused, of either sort of shaping narratives that people may not necessarily be aligned with. There's all of this also fake news conversation that goes on, saying, people are paid to put things out there without vetting them properly. Is there any sort of, how do I put it? Does government have any justification in doing what they have done with regards to, because we heard from the minister or from the presidency saying this was not a reaction to Mr. President's tweet being deleted. It was a compilation of sort of things that they feel like Twitter has done over time. Do you agree with, this sort of reaction to what influencers are able to do?
I totally disagree, because if we are to be realistic, more of these things are actually from Facebook. So if you're talking about fake news, you get more of it from Facebook, because on Facebook, you can post whatever you want to post. We young guys are really there to say this is fake. But our parents probably pick up those things. They're already sending pieces on WhatsApp. You get? So more of those contents are actually from Facebook. If it's on Twitter, you would obviously get someone to challenge you almost immediately that this is wrong. People are going to be in your comment section accusing you of putting out wrong information. It is quicker on Twitter than other platforms. So this, whatever they have is personal. It's just ego and them trying to, show power.
I know people are saying, we need to come back as quickly as we can and we shouldn't be thinking of alternatives. But if Twitter never comes back, what happens to someone like you? Are there options for people? Because like we've said, there's so many young people. We see these tweets every day, people selling things on Twitter. There's a lot of commerce that goes on there. I know how many things that contacts have made from there as well. Is there any option? Is there any sort of light you see out of this if this goes on for much longer than we hope for?
If this goes long for much longer, then the government should be ready to provide jobs for us, because we are all going to be jobless. Where do I start from? Go back to sea or start marine engineering that I abandoned 6-7 years ago. Or someone that makes food and sells immediately. Does the person start going to social to sell their food? So if they don't have an alternative for every one of us, then we have to come back almost immediately.
So let me come back to you now. What do you think of, this constant talk of regulation? A huge part of the statement the presidency put out, or the Minister of Information put out, said something about over-the-top platforms will have to. Oh, okay, I think Tosin is not with us anymore. Let me continue. I mean, the regulation is a big conversation now. Is it something that you think needs to happen? Because social media is an open space. You know, governments around the world, not just Nigeria, have always wondered how do we sort of take control of this, especially with the constant talk about fake news and the need to regulate what is put out there. Is this something that you think needs to happen? And if it's going to happen, how does it even happen?
So I think the only way out is to have a governing body that whenever this kind of fake news are out, they tag the fake news. We can see during NSAS, you can see the military or the army always coming out every time with bombarding every information like fake news, fake news. So if there can be a body that can regulate and say, so whenever there's an information out there that they think, this is not right, then tag fake news. So let that organization be known for that.
Yeah.
So if you want to verify anything, send them a DM. If it's fake, but aside from that, there is no way.
Yeah.
Unless you want to shut down the internet.
Do you give us an idea of what you think the number of people, at least in your circle, that, work off of Twitter and, the kinds of things they do? Because, you have conversations sometimes with people who are not very conversant with how social media works. And most times when you tell them you work on the internet, they think it's something bad you're doing, because of this, Yahoo culture. When they hear I work on the internet or I work on social media, they don't necessarily understand. So give us a bit of an idea of what it is you do on Twitter and how many people you think, or people at least, that do these things, and why it's very important for these things to come back.
So I know late last year, Placard put out a list of about 60,000 influencers, different genres, from lifestyle to music to makeup, over 60,000 youths that survive on this platform. So they make their money daily. So imagine you now sending those 60,000 people outside. Tell me when they will start.
Yeah.
They will start other things. So we have people keep coming up every day. New people, I want to be an influencer. Now, people actually study social media marketing as a course, unlike when we all wanted to be doctors, engineers, and lawyers. Now, people legit go to school just to study social media influencing and marketing. So it's a big deal now. It's a very big deal.
Yeah. I mean, with the statement, like I said, security is the biggest reason why this was done, which is why I keep going back to the talk about fake news, because the presidency said, we have to control what is out there because it's sort of inflaming tension and emotions and all of that. Is there an argument for that to say the country needs to be safe first before we start talking about, all of these other things about people needing to tweet?
Number one, security is very important. And we need to know the state of the country. Because if things are happening in, let's say, the 3rd Street, for example, I can easily come on Twitter and say, so is happening here, and it goes around. But now, when they shut down the Twitter, 80 people were killed somewhere, 88 people were killed somewhere. They started, something happened in your state. If not for Twitter, how are we supposed to see all these things that are happening?
Yeah.
So the country is not even safe. Then you are cutting out how we are verifying information or seeing things. So I have to wait till the next day to buy newspapers or wait for some old channels to our telecommunication to broadcast by 6 p.m. or by 9 p.m. or by doesn't. But with Twitter, I could easily see everything going around. Like what is happening in your state, people will say it almost immediately. So that's the country is not even safe. They are now trying to block how we are verifying information. It's so unfair.
I think we're joined now by David Hundeyin, who's a journalist. David, how are you doing?
Very well, thank you.
Okay, thanks for joining us. Because I was having a conversation about, regulation earlier, and it's a conversation that's not just happening in Nigeria. There's a lot of talk around the world, about, the constant need to at least have some control over, information that's put out on social media, especially ones that tend to inflame or incite. Is there any argument for that? Because the presidency did put out a statement saying that security was the biggest reason why the suspension happened. Is there any argument for that?
I think that's a very disingenuous argument to make. The attempt to link conversations happening on social media to bad security outcomes. Let's be very clear about this. The only reason that Nigeria has an insecurity problem is because the Nigerian government has failed to deal with the insecurity problem. The Nigerian government itself is incompetent. It's not because Nnamdi Kanu is writing something on Twitter or anybody is responding to something happening on Facebook or whatever. This idea that social media is somehow inflaming tensions is a very dishonest and very disingenuous way of framing the conversation. It is not social media that is going out killing people. It's not the unknown gunmen, as they're called, or the bandits or attackers, or whichever euphemism we use to describe terrorists in Nigeria. They are not on Twitter, right? They're not on social media. So why isn't the government doing something about them? That is where the security problem is. The government is not doing its job. The security agencies are not doing their job. So the need to constantly frame this conversation in that way, I find it extremely dishonest. And it's not like, if the conversation is being framed according to those parameters, that somehow social media is an impediment to national security that must be somehow worked around, then we're asking the wrong question. So inevitably we're going to get to the wrong answer, which is what the likes of, Lai Mohammed want to achieve, right? It's a dishonest way of framing the conversation. Social media, I mean, yes, you could say there's an argument that people make comments that are inciting. People say all sorts of things on social media all over the world, not just in Nigeria, right? First of all, social media itself, Twitter in particular, Twitter itself has a pretty robust mechanism for dealing with these things. So if it's about making hateful, inciting comments, Twitter itself has a very robust moderation mechanism for taking down things that are hate speech, things that are offensive, racial slurs, that sort of thing, speech against protected and minority groups. And if it's about disseminating fake news, Twitter also has its ways of dealing with those things. In fact, as I'm sure we remember from fairly recent history, Twitter hasn't even been shy to take on institutions as powerful as the US presidency, when it comes to this issue of fake news and inciting comments. So since when did Nigeria become such an insurmountable problem that all of a sudden, the platform itself doesn't know how to solve the problem? And somehow it's the Nigerian government that has the solution. The Nigerian government that hasn't figured out how to give us light for 24 hours straight in a day, somehow has figured out how to effectively police the content created by 2 or 3 million Nigerians on Twitter. That's completely nonsensical. It's not true, right? The fact of the matter is that some people have an interest in policing what people can and cannot say on the internet. Some people have an interest in controlling what information is allowed to be out there. Because if you have control over the information that goes into people's heads, by default, you also have you have control over the political outcomes that are a result of that information. So if you have lost control of that information, and social media, Twitter specifically, is making it very hard to maintain a single narrative, right? If previously in 2013, there could be an attack by herdsmen in Benue State, right? And then the official press release coming from the police would call it a farmers versus herders clash. And people would see a clash and they just, oh yeah, it's a communal clash, that's fine. Nowadays, there will be a video going around on Twitter showing it in its very visceral form that what happened. This was a massacre, an unprovoked massacre of pregnant women, of children. You will see graphic videos. You will see things that present the real picture of what is happening. And that is what the government does not want. That is what the issue is. So it's not that Twitter is the problem. Twitter is the solution.
All right, because we're going to be talking with you much later on in the show, so please just stick around. But we want to really just take a break now. But before we do that, Tosin, very quickly, if you can hear me, where do you see this ending up, if you can, in a sentence? What do you want to see happen as soon as possible?
I want to see it happen quickly. Ebuka, let me quickly show you numbers. I love my numbers. Last year, while the numbers were dropping in terms of GDP, telecommunications contributed 10% to Nigeria's GDP. Now, why did it surge? They saw a surge in increase in data usage. Now, if you're cutting off over 3 million Nigerians from Twitter, a good number of them spend their time on Twitter. They are consuming data. You will also be seeing a drop in the GDP. So if you're looking at it from the whole ramification, it's not just about, denying people access to speak or do other things, but GDP is going to dip. You're going to lose that surge that telecommunications saw in their revenue from data. You will lose those numbers. So if you look at everything, all the different angles from unemployment to revenue to GDP to taxes, the taxes on the lost taxes on those revenue, it has to come back, and it has to come back quickly.
So, Sin, we're going to take a break now. Bamilare, thank you very much for joining us. When we come back, we're not going to be continuing this conversation on the suspension of Twitter's activities here in Nigeria temporarily. We hear. Please don't.
I am ready for your action. Just want my love. You should cut off all distraction. It's all on you now. And just give me some reaction. Just want my like the way you move.
All right, welcome back. We've been talking about, the federal government's suspension of Twitter's activities here in Nigeria temporarily. And I'm joined now by Timi Olagunju, who's a lawyer. Thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
I want to talk about Twitter now. And, this constant conversation about, the powers that they sort of wield when it comes to free speech. It was a huge talking point when the account of the president of the United States, or the then president, Donald Trump, was deleted. There was some excitement from people, but there was also the talk about, this might be a slippery slope that we're going down, where a tech company is able to control speech globally. As much as the Nigerian government has said that the deleted tweet is not the reason why they have done what they did, a lot of people believe, that was a trigger for what we are seeing now, where, Twitter deletes the comments of Mr. President. Whether we agree or disagree with what was said is a whole other conversation. Now, my point is, looking at that picture, what do you think about Twitter's role in sort of controlling narratives, and, the fairness of it, if we're talking about free speech and what can be called free speech?
Well, that will bring us to the circumstance of the specific scenarios where they either had to remove the Twitter page or remove the comments. Twitter itself can be likened to a city. And a city is run by certain rules. And certain rules guide the city. So, for example, Lagos, as a state and a city, has its rules, in terms of you drive this way, you don't drive this way. When you violate those rules, or it is purportedly seen that there is a violation of those rules, then there is a certain consequence that come with it. So, on the flip side, when you look at Twitter as a house or a city, you see that Twitter has its rules. And to a large extent, those circumstances are circumstances where people have violated those rules to a large extent. However, what we might see going forward is the fact that there might be need for an expedited platform for dispute resolution. In other words, when you feel that the rules have not been applied fairly to you by some of these platforms, right? Then you can then say, oh, you want to appeal for some for some expedited hearing of some sort. But the truth is that when you're in Twitter's house, when you're in Facebook's house, or whatever platform, they have rules. And you see, we must understand the business of contracts, right? You can decide not to be in Twitter. You can decide to be off Twitter. But when you decide to come onto Twitter, there are terms and conditions which most people don't read and which most times are elaborate. So one of the things on Twitter's side is to ensure that these rules are simple enough for people to understand, illustrative enough for people to take passion in trying to understand. And then on the flip side of those who are joining this platform, it's also important to take time to read the rules of the house.
So I get that, and I completely agree with you, because Twitter, you voluntarily sign up to this space, and when you sign up, you click a terms and conditions, which tells you what you must abide by. So that's definitely true, and I agree that Twitter has a right to do what they do. But on the flip side now is a country where Twitter operates, and the country says, okay, we don't want you anymore, and because this is my country, and you can come in here. And there's this argument that you are now restricting free speech, which is a fair argument. But how does that now work when you counter the argument with saying, okay, this is Nigeria and we don't want Twitter here because our rules or whatever, our reasons are does not accommodate the way you run your business. Is that a fair argument for the federal government to be putting out in a case like this?
Absolutely not a fair argument for the federal government. And there are certain bases for this. First is that we cannot use the argument of company and that the federal government has authority over company on the Twitter argument. One is the fact that, you see, when it comes to company, what we call artificial persons, they are registered under the Corporate Affairs Commission. And so, under the Corporate Affairs Commission, they are guided by the provisions of CAMA, Companies and Allied Matters Act, and under the administrative and policy framework of the government. But in the case of Twitter, Twitter is not an artificial person in Nigeria, right? And so, to a large extent, that corporate argument around, gagging companies and telling a company will not sufficiently suffice. That is the first point. Second point is the fact that in terms of this issue, firstly, Section 39, subsection 1 to 3 talks about freedom of speech, right? Freedom of expression. But now let's take it a step further. Nigeria is a signatory to certain treaties and part of certain United Nations resolution to the effect that they would not just only ensure freedom of expression, but also provide tools or facilitate policies that will drive tools that will allow that freedom of expression is maximally utilized and not restricted, right? So if you combine this together, firstly, is Twitter a platform where people can express themselves? Yes. Now, is the federal government's policy restrictive on allowing people express themselves through whatever platform that they have? Yes, because the policy is not facilitatory. So those are two key issues. Now, let's now come to socioeconomic rights. Nigeria is a signatory to the African Charter for Human and People's Rights, which also has been domesticated in Nigeria. And to a large extent, Twitter provides life and livelihood to a lot of Nigerians. So to a large extent, Nigeria seems the government is the violator in this context. In that context, and you see, true, to be frank, on this platform, it seems that we have much more of a presidency than a precedence. Because you look at the intergovernmental agencies and the way they operate. For example, is it the place of the Ministry of Information to dish out policy statements instructing that there should be a licensing of OTTs? Right? No.
We'll come to that because we'll talk about the legality of all of this even because that's probably one of the most fascinating things to me and a lot of Nigerians, how this quickly happened and how it, we'll come back to that. But you mentioned livelihood there, and I'm joined now by Natasha Akide, who does a lot of work, I want to believe, on social media, especially Twitter. Tasha, how did this come to you and how has it affected you? I mean, we're about 48 hours going now since this, over 48 hours now since this pronouncement was made. How has it affected you as a business and, how did you receive this news?
I am still sad. You know what I'm saying? I feel really devastated and I keep asking myself this question every day, how did we get here as a country? But let's first off understand why we're in the situation we're in right now. We're in the situation we're in right now because of a deleted tweet. A tweet that Twitter saw as violating community guidelines. A tweet the president put out clearly threatening Nigerians. That is why we're in the position where we're in right now. Because of a deleted tweet. And then we have Lai Mohammed, Uncle Lai Mohammed, as I like to call him that, banning Twitter. The Minister of Information. Where's our senators? Like, how did this happen so fast? In less than 24, 48 hours, Twitter has been banned in this country, Nigeria, before our very own eyes, because of a deleted tweet. I know they would say, it's not necessarily because of the deleted tweet, blah, blah. But we know when that tweet was deleted, Lai Mohammed was out there saying Twitter is suspect in his term. And less than a day later, the platform is being banned without considering how many Nigerians are on that platform, without considering how many Nigerians make a living from that platform. Bypassing the senators that are supposed to have the interest of Nigerians at heart, senators that we voted into power, that is supposed to protect our interests. Nobody is saying anything. I make a living off Twitter. So many, we have over 30 million Nigerians on Twitter. And then you scrub it out because of a deleted tweet. It is just devastating. It is, I don't know the crime I have committed and the crime innocent Nigerians have committed by being a Nigerian. At this point, it's like, how did we get here? How do we get here?
You mentioned, the National Assembly there, which is what I was going to ask Timmy, but I'm still going to come back to him since he's a lawyer. But what do you expect your representatives to do at a time like this? We've had a few, I think the opposition sort of minority caucus in the House did put out a statement saying that this has to be reversed. The opposition party, the PDP, has put out a statement. We've had 1 or 2 governors speak up about this. So there's some sort of conversation going on, telling Mr. President to reverse this immunity. But is that enough, and what do you want to see?
At this point where our fundamental human rights is being threatened, all hands should be on deck. It's not about 1 or 2 governors having a say about Twitter being banned. Where is our senators? Our senators get paid monthly. They take so many allowances, wardrobe allowance, oxygen allowance, breathing allowance, being in the position that they're in allowance. What exactly are they doing? And where is it in the Constitution that the Minister of Information, an appointee in this administration, will have the right to ban Twitter before our very own eyes? It wasn't a bill. Automatically, Twitter has been banned. Automatically, I can't access that platform. Automatically, I have so many corporate bodies that reaches out to Twitter influencers to run sponsored campaigns. Automatically, that cannot be done. Because of what? Because of what? What exactly did this platform Twitter do? We do not have jobs in this country. We decide to create jobs for ourselves. And we're about to what? Not have this platform that does so much for both me and a lot of Nigerians. It's wickedness. It's wickedness.
I'll come back to you, Tasha, because I want to explore this legal part of things now with Timmy. Like she mentioned there, this was an announcement we saw from the Minister of Information. It wasn't an executive order. I don't know if it was. We didn't hear the National Assembly sort of, pass anything. Does the minister have the power to do this? And why was compliance so quick? Does the telecom operators, do they have any... Are you surprised by how quickly they acted with, this directive that was put out? Because we saw the directive, and in about 2-3 hours, everybody started wondering their Twitter pages were acting funny already. What do you think of the legality of how this went down?
Well, firstly, in terms of surprise, before we even get to the legality, the truth about it is, like Tasha's rightly stated, it seems that the atmosphere in the country only shows that we have a presidency where words of truth get in from the left ear or from the right ear and comes out from the left ear because there's nothing in between to hold it. That's what we seem to see in this country. Now, in terms of the legality of the minister's action, it is no surprise. In fact, my heartfelt sympathy goes to media houses who are corporate bodies under Nigeria and bound by the regulations of NBC in that context. My heartfelt sympathy goes to them, because if a single tweet can be the foundation upon which all this has happened, then what are media houses really going through in this country? However, On the issue of the legality of the action of the minister might claim that, well, they have instructions from the president, and so they are the mouthpiece of the president in that context. But whether the president or the minister, President Buhari himself or the minister made that statement, the statement itself violates constitutional provisions of Section 39. It violates the provisions on certain treaties that have been signed by the Nigerian government to facilitate tools that would ensure, the freedom of expression is not just seen to be given, but adequately given. However, on the particular instruction, this is where illegality or certain misnomers to the agency's operation comes in, that, from the Minister of Information, that there'll be some licensing of OTT platforms. It's quite pathetic. So when you look at it carefully, these platforms are under the administrative or policy framework of the NCC. That's the National Communications Commission, not the NBC. And the NCC in that context is not under the purview of the Ministry of Information, but the Minister of Communication and Digital Economy. So you see that it seems like the government itself is in a confused state of who is to do what. Like I like to say, majoring in minors and soon become minors in their major. So whether the president says it or not, whether the minister says it or not, it is illegal ab initio from the very start of that statement. And so I'm not surprised that there seems to be certain compliance, because we seem to be living in a state of fear rather than a state of truth. And conscience is an open wound. Only truth can heal.
Very true there. Tosin, I believe you're still with us. Tosin, if you can hear me, I want to talk about, we're seeing a lot of people talk about walking around this. People are trying to use their VPNs to, see if they can tweet. We did see the Minister of Justice now say that anybody seen tweeting will face the law. So even if businesses can work around this to still stay on a platform like that, a lot of the consumers and customers might not be able to do that. So that's a whole other conversation. And of course, we're talking about investments in the long run and, the ease of doing business and how this even affects the picture for Nigeria. So people are saying even if Twitter comes back tomorrow now, trust has already been eroded and ease of doing business we're going to slide down even more. So are you looking into the future? What do you see?
What I'm saying is this, right? We've looked at all the different angles and how this impacts on businesses. Everybody has to start adjusting their pitch deck, also start giving room for a regulatory risk, right, which has actually gone higher, knowing that things could happen so swiftly without enough notice. Also, our foreign direct investment, we've seen a significant drop over the years. What are we signaling? Signal is very, very important, right? We have to be very aggressive about the signal we're giving to the global economy, about the signal we're giving to other people that plan on coming here, because they have options. So they are thinking, could it be Kenya? Could it be Ghana? So every move we make, every decision we make, foreign investment has feet and it will go to where it is being favored. So these are all the things we should put into consideration. Also, Ebuka, we need to bear in mind that SMEs provide a huge proportion of the jobs, right? Now, many of them find their cost of acquisition cheaper. So by having a Twitter page, doing a retweet, doing a campaign, it's cheaper than having a brick-to-mortar store of printing out flyers and doing all these other things. So you're significantly kicking up that cost as well. So from a business angle, from the numbers angle, from an investment angle, this is not favorable. And it is something that they should actually look into and look into it quickly.
How do you, as a young person, if Twitter comes back today, how do we prevent this from happening again? Is there something Nigerians can do?
What can we do? Like, how could we have prevented this? Could we have said, oh, no, you mustn't block us all out? What can we do? All we can do is to just keep having to hold them accountable, sharing our voices, expressing that this is wrong and you can't just do that to us. Yeah. Accountability.
All right, Tim, is there anything we can do? One sentence.
Well, basically, I think, you see, when you talk about courts, people always think there's always only the court of law, but we also have the court of public opinion. And so the Nigerian people, and that's why Chapter 2 says that although it's not justiciable in the court, you can't come to court on it, but you can come to the court of public opinion to hold your leaders accountable. And I think we need to start from the National Assembly. In both houses of Senate and House of Reps, we have ICT committees. Nigerian youths need to go and find out who are members of the ICT committees of the National Assembly, Senate, and House of Reps, and begin to pressure them to pressure the National Assembly to speak on this issue, not just in terms of declaration of statement, but in terms of his constitutional duty, oversight function on the executive arm of government.
Thank you very much, Timi Olagunju. I don't know. We're going to take a break now. When we come back, we'll still be talking about, all of the Twitter issues. I think Tasha is going to hang around. So thank you very much, of course, to Tosin for being with us today. Please, we'll be right back.
What else? What else? Come on, come on, come on. Let's go.
All right, welcome back. We're going to wrap up our conversation now, talking about the suspension of Twitter's activities here in Nigeria by the presidency. And I'm joined again now by David Honey. David, before the break, Timi made a very interesting point there about, having sort of sympathy for traditional media houses and what they might have been going through with regards to, regulation from the government, if this can be done to Twitter. And it brings me to the question with you now, because you're a journalist, and a lot of people are worried that this is a slippery slope we're going down now. If this can be done so blatantly and so quickly, are we going to go back to the time when, under the military, the media was completely shut off, and from free speech to free press and all of that now becomes bundled as one? Are you very worried about that?
Well, I think I've made this point before that at no point actually has Nigeria ever actually had a free press. So I remember I appeared on this show at the start of last year, and I mentioned that the Global Press Freedom Ranking of 2020 had Nigeria at number 115 out of about 180 countries. And I remember saying that that was a bad position to be in. Nigeria has actually slipped in 2021, slipped 8 places. So the situation is very bad and it's getting worse. From a personal point of view, I can tell you that journalists, especially journalists who do actual journalism, journalists who don't reproduce press releases, which is what a lot of what we refer to as journalism in Nigeria, we're really going through it. So I have to flee the country. So I'm not in Nigeria and I'm under asylum protection where I am, which is why I'm not allowed to say where I am. So this is a real thing. And even in absentia, they still do keep coming after me. I have to live in a constant state of paranoia. So I found it funny when you said, are we going down a slippery slope? We've already gone down that slope. We're already down that slope. The slope is here with us. It is what it is. We're already there, right? The point I made earlier on, well, I don't think it was on this show. I made it on a different show, was that people get the impression that Nigeria's press is free because you don't have men in uniforms storming into the newsroom and pointing guns at everyone like they used to do under Abacha. But the point is that doesn't necessarily have to be the case for you to have a tethered press, right? Then I made the point that the biggest ad spender in Nigeria is not a bank, it's not a telecoms company, it's not an oil company, it's the Nigerian government. The Nigerian government is the biggest ad spender in Nigeria. And you and I know that ad revenue is what funds any media industry anywhere in the world. So Nigerian journalism, by that implication, is heavily dependent on ad revenue, which is majorly coming from the federal and state government. So as a result, even without the government coming in to point a gun at your head and telling you not to cover this story or to remove this coverage or whatever, you yourself will self-censor. You will self-censor. That money is a pair of golden handcuffs. That's the reality. It's also the reality that even the media houses which attempt to take it a step further than just reproducing press releases, the media houses that try to be brave, they get stepped on in a really bad way. So I remember last year when I believe it was Punch newspaper made the decision to start referring to the president as Major General Buhari, as against President Buhari, making a point of his consistent refusal to obey court orders and his consistent disrespect for basic rule of law. The government then made the decision to cut all of their ad budget that was going to Punch newspaper, and as a result, the newspaper shed more than a third of its newsroom.
Okay.
So in other words, its ability.
Yeah. Sorry to cut you off, David, there, because I just want to go to our other guests very quickly because we're running out of time. And I just want to find out from you, Tacha, I know you're still with us here. For someone like you now who heavily relies on social media to run your many businesses, what's the plan for you? Because I asked this to other business owners earlier. If Twitter never comes back, for example, if this goes on for much longer, what is the plan? Because as much as we don't want to look for another plan because we want to believe governments and their talk about this being temporary, but is there a way out for someone like you from this?
You're muted.
Can you hear me?
Hello, I can hear you now.
Okay, yes, go on.
What was the question? Go on, please.
I said, for someone like you who's a business owner who relies on social media, for your businesses to run, what's the way out of a situation like this? Do you see any light at all out of this, at the end of whatever tunnel we are looking at right now?
The way out is that Twitter is coming back. It just has to be back. Because like I did say earlier, we have 30 million Nigerians on this platform. Like I did say earlier, we've been able to create jobs for ourselves from this platform. We have small businesses on this platform. We reach out to a larger audience on this platform. We make money out of this platform. We feed ourselves from this platform. We have families that we feed off of this platform. So the only way I think is for the platform to be back.
Yes.
Because I don't understand how, as a citizen of this country, a bona fide citizen of this country will not have the right of expression.
Are you surprised that,
So Twitter has to be back.
Because the same post was deleted from Facebook, but Facebook is still running. Are you surprised that Twitter is the one being affected? And why do you think that is?
Twitter being affected might just be the very first platform. We know how this government operates. We know how the administration operates. And that's what some people do not understand. It's not just going to be Twitter. This administration will come for Instagram. They will come for WhatsApp. They will come for the whole internet as a whole. Wake up one morning, I would not see internet. Because you tell me how Twitter will be banned in less than 24. That's to tell you how fast this administration can be if they want to be. So it's not about, Facebook deleted the same comment by the president for violating its community rules. It's about the fact that it's not just the Twitter platform. The whole internet as a whole is being threatened at this point. Anything can happen. So therefore, Twitter has to be back.
I want to ask the same question to David. David, why do you think Twitter was the one to go first, or the one to go, instead of Facebook?
Well, specifically because the type of engagement that takes place on Twitter is a lot more critical and contains a lot more critical reasoning and the type of thinking that the Nigerian government doesn't want to see than the other platforms.
Yeah.
And that's a result of the type of platform Twitter is. It's a micro-blogging platform that forces you to condense your thoughts into 280 characters, which makes you think more. And as a result, unlike Facebook, Twitter, unfortunately, tends to be significantly more intellectual. And this has actually been proven objectively. There are studies proving this. So which makes Twitter effectively an opposition party in Nigeria.
Do you agree
pretty
with
much the reason? But as she said, they're going to come for the rest of them as well. This is just the first.
So you're agreeing with her they are going to come for the rest of them, or do you agree with her other point that Twitter has to come back? And what does temporary look like to you?
So I don't know if you saw a story that just came out today. It was published by the Foundation for Investigative Journalism, which is Fisayo Soyombo's investigative outfit. Apparently on Saturday, which was yesterday, the Nigerian federal government held a meeting with officials from the Chinese government. And the meeting was about constructing a Nigerian version of China's Golden Shield internet censorship system. In other words, the Nigerian government has ambitions of completely controlling the internet like China does or like North Korea does, and having a government-filtered intranet as against the free internet or relatively free internet that we currently have. So that's actually, so we've gone past the point of, is this going to happen? It's already happening. They're already making those moves. So at this point, it needs to become an issue that the National Assembly, if they still exist, because I really don't know what the House of Reps and the House of Senate are doing right now, but it needs to become an issue for our supposed elected representatives to take up. Because if this is allowed to happen, it's not just us who are going to be in trouble. It's not just Thatcher or David Ndei or Ebuka that is going to be in trouble. Even the so-called elected representatives themselves are going to find out very quickly that they've effectively created an untouchable dictator, and he's going to come after them too. So they need to understand that this is a fight for everybody now. It's everybody versus a tiny group of people in Meitama who think that who think that the rest of us are their cattle, or they're lab rats.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you so much, Tasha, for joining us. Hopefully next time when you're invited, we're talking about happier things, but thank you very much for your contributions today. And we're also here appealing to the federal government to take heed of the advice and, let free speech thrive. I would usually end the show by saying you can follow the conversation on Twitter, but unfortunately I can't do that today. Hopefully by next Sunday, we'll have happier things to speak about. My name is Ebuka Obiuchendo, and I'll see you next Sunday.